Howard Lutnick is so evil that it is hard for the average normal person with a functional moral compass to comprehend his demonic level of pure psychopathy. Just imagine someone saying that about you. Oh my god. Not exactly wrong though. Howard Lutnick is one of the most demented stooges the president keeps at his side. And trust me, that's not an easy feat in a cabinet that consists of dog-shooting banshees and teal-backed weasels who defend the honor of murderers and Nazis more than that of their own families sometimes. Maybe you've seen clips of this greasy-looking jackal propped up next to Trump when the president is asked a question about a particular financier.
I don't understand why the Jeffrey Epstein case would be of interest to anybody. Really, only pretty bad people, including fake news, want to keep something like that going.
Yeah, that's our 44th Secretary of Commerce, Howard Lutnick, practically doubling over in laughter like a rabid hyena whenever someone utters the name Jeffrey Epstein in his presence.
President, is Vice President Vance hosting a gathering this evening to talk about how to respond to the Epstein situation?
Is he working on what?
Is he hosting some kind of gathering of top advisors this evening to talk about how to respond to the Epstein situation?
I don't know. I could ask you that question.
What a totally normal and non-bone-chilling, terrifying reaction. They say not to judge a book by its cover, but in Howard Lutnick's case, I'd argue his sleazy, perverse, con-man aura shouldn't be written off as just an unfortunate side effect of having that haircut. But because he is everywhere, wields a considerable amount of power over US economic growth and trade, and is currently 10th in line to the presidency, I think we should talk about him. Dig a little bit into his past, and who knows, maybe we'll find something interesting. After all, he does have some curious search suggestions pop up when you type his name into X, the everything app, Howard Lutnick Epstein, and Howard Lutnick 9/11. I'm sure those can only imply good things. Let's start with the one that's been in the news so much, Jeffrey Epstein, the greatest blackmailer ever. While that is a title I would be inclined to agree with, that's not a title I gave him. Those are the words Howard Lutnick used to describe Epstein, or his next-door neighbor of over 10 years. Even though it's in direct contradiction to what the FBI and DOJ said in their infamous memo released July of last year, that actually the Epstein files contain no evidence of the late predator being in any way, shape, or form a blackmailer. How dare you make such an assertion? Now we've got the Commerce Secretary, a man who, I need to emphasize, raised his family a few feet away from where Jeffrey Epstein was carrying out the most unspeakable crimes imaginable, is going on a podcast, the New York Post podcast of all things, I didn't even know they had one, and accidentally discrediting the judgment of the very administration he works for.
So how come Bill Gates and all these other people could hang around him and not see what you saw? Or did they see it and ignore it? Or
no, they participated. That's what his MO was, get a massage. And what happened in that massage room, I assume was on video. This guy was the greatest blackmailer ever. Blackmailed people. That's how we had money.
Strange, right? That's a pretty big contradiction, I'd say. It's almost like our government is run by the most laughable amateurs and crooks on the planet. As evil as they may be, the one thing you can always count on is that they will be hindered by their gross incompetence every step of the way. But this wasn't the only statement that came back to bite our boy Howard. Later on in the episode, he makes a big show about describing the depravity of Epstein that he witnessed up close. How there was a time in 2005 that he and his wife popped in on their next door neighbor, only to be completely creeped out to the point where they vowed to never socialize with him again.
And he opens the doors, and there's a massage table in the middle of the room.
Ooh.
And candles all around and stuff. I say to him, how often do you have a massage? And he says, every day. And then he gets weirdly close to me, and he says, and the right kind of massage. Now my wife is standing here. So she looks at me, and I look at her. And we say, I'm sorry, we have to go. And we left. And in the 6 or 8 steps it takes to get from his house to my house, my wife and I decided that I will never be in the room with that disgusting person ever again.
I mean, listen to how dramatic this sounds. How could a man with so much conviction in his voice possibly be lying to us? Well, my guess is that when this episode was recorded last fall, Lutnick wasn't expecting for more files to be released that would actually show a much closer relationship between the two men than he previously expressed. And he also didn't expect to be hauled in front of Congress in February to be asked about said relationship. At the very start of the hearing, just as he had told the New York Post, Lutnick assures the Senate Appropriations Committee that he barely had anything to do with that person, making sure to emphasize over and over that he really didn't know the guy at all. Jeffrey Epstein, who? My neighbor of over 10 years? Who literally got arrested and went to jail in Palm Beach while I was living next to him? Why, you're telling me this for the first time.
I'm glad to be here to make it clear that I met Jeffrey Epstein when I moved to a house next door to him in New York. Right? And I met him then. Over the next 14 years, I met him 2 other times that I can recall. 2 times. And that is none for 6 years. So 6 years later, I met him. And then a year and a half after that, I met him, and never again. Probably the total, and you've seen all of these documents, of these millions and millions of documents, there may be 10 emails connecting me with him, probably about 10 emails connecting me with him over a 14-year period. I did not have any relationship with him. I barely had anything to do with that person. Okay.
At the beginning of the hearing, he almost seems excited for an opportunity to explain himself. He literally says he's glad to clear his name. But then Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen did something that I don't think Lutnick had quite anticipated. He pushed back. And then all of a sudden, Howard Lutnick remembered he was testifying under oath.
I think you understand the root of concern here. It's the way you described very emphatically your first encounter with him in his apartment, said you were disgusted, would never have any contact with him again. Did you in fact make the visit to Jeffrey Epstein's private island?
I did have lunch with him as I was on a boat going across on a family vacation. My wife was with me, as were my 4 children and nannies. I had another couple they were there as well with their children, and we had lunch on the island. That is true, for an hour, and we left with all of my children, with my nannies and my wife, all together. We were on family vacation. We were not apart. To suggest there was anything untoward about that in 2012, I don't recall why we did it, but
Mr. Secretary.
Now, a couple things I want to note here. Firstly, why did he feel the need to clarify that he brought all of his kids back with him? Why would you say something like that, Howard? I'm pretty sure a simple "we left the island" would have sufficed. Secondly, he makes it a point to say that this happened in 2012. My guess is it's because he wants us to think, oh, well, that's so long ago. Why should we care? It's 2026. But I actually think it makes him look infinitely worse. Not only is 2012, let's see, after 2005, it's also several years after Epstein went to jail for, and I'm gonna read the actual charges, solicitation of prostitution and procuring a person under the age of 18 for prostitution. Those are the charges he pled guilty to. Now, was it a ridiculously lenient plea deal, and could he have actually gone away for much longer than that? Absolutely, but that's a different conversation entirely. What I want everyone to understand is that 2008 is a very pivotal year in the Epstein saga. It's the year he went to jail for being a pedophile. Anyone who continued to associate with him after his release in 2009 should be investigated. Why were you hanging out with a convicted pedophile, Howard Lutnick? Why did you not only bring your wife and kids to his private island, but another couple and their kids to the island too? There was nowhere else to eat? Y'all were stranded at sea and starving? We know this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment trip either, because there are emails in the Epstein files of you coordinating the event. In 2012, you wrote Jeffrey Epstein, your longtime neighbor, "Hi Jeff, we are landing in St. Thomas early Saturday afternoon and planning to head over to St. Bart's on Monday at some point. Where are you located? What is exact location for my captain? Does Sunday evening for dinner sound good? I have another couple, Michael and Marcy Lehrman, with me on my boat, and each of us has 4 children. Thanks, Howard." What about that 2005 visit where you swore to never see him again? You just forgot about that? You forgot that was him? How many billionaire pedophiles do you know? Well, I guess more than one. Then, a couple days after the hangout, out, Epstein's assistant wrote Lutnick saying it was nice seeing you. And I just have to point out here, we wouldn't be talking about any of this without the work of congressmen like Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie. I cannot stress enough that if it wasn't for their legislation forcing the DOJ to release the 6 million files they had, we wouldn't have known Howard Lutnick to be lying. And still, they've only released half of the files. If this kind of stuff was kept behind lock and key for so long, I can only imagine what they're still hiding.
There was, look, I looked through the millions of documents for my name, just like everybody else.
Just like everybody else. Yeah, I don't think everybody else was doing that. But it makes sense as to why he would. Turns out Howard Lutnick's name is all over the files. In 2011, for instance, we can see from this document that they appear to have been setting up calls with one another. In this one, it looks like they're scheduled to get drinks, and on December 28th, 2012, just a few days after their island get-together, it appears they signed paperwork to go into business together. Both men signing on behalf of LLCs to acquire stakes in a now defunct advertising company by the name of AdFin. When asked for comment on any of this, a spokesperson for the Commerce Department fired back with, "This is nothing more than a failing attempt by the legacy media to distract from the administration's accomplishments." I think I'm going insane. The emails also revealed that the two men were still interacting all the way up to 2018, 13 years after Lutnick initially said he had cut ties. Oops, oopsie, happens to the best of us, I guess. In 2017, Epstein made a donation of $50,000 to a Wall Street dinner honoring Howard Lutnick. Then in 2018, Lutnick appears to have written Epstein complaining about an expansion plan for an art museum next to their houses. "They will build exactly across from you, a massive building to block your sunlight and views. They are trying to jam it through. It matters that we fight. You should put in the letter. I'm sending a lawyer. Don't ignore this," Lutnick told the sex offender. If you feel like you weren't already losing your mind enough, I want to also direct your attention to a campaign event that Howard Lutnick put on for Hillary Clinton in 2015. The event was held next door to Epstein's home, an event that Epstein was invited to. According to a report from USA Today, it is unclear whether the wealthy financier attended the event. Even Lutnick's house at 11 East 71st Street was once owned by Epstein, who sold it to Comet Trust in 1996, which then sold it to Lutnick 2 years later. All of these people are connected, and I hate it. I hate it so much, it's breaking my brain. On that note, let's talk about 9/11. Contrary to popular belief, Howard Lutnick didn't just crawl out of the fiery pits of hell one day and decide to become Secretary of Commerce. He actually had another job before this one, CEO of financial services giant Cantor Fitzgerald. For many years, Cantor's New York offices were based on floors 101 to 105 of One World Trade Center. When the North Tower was struck by American Airlines Flight 11 in September 2001, the firm lost 658 of its employees. Everyone who had come to work for Cantor Fitzgerald that day was tragically killed, including Howard Lutnick's own brother. Half of the victims left behind children, and more than 36 widows were pregnant at the time. The only reason Howard's life was spared is because he was dropping off his son for his first day of kindergarten.
We are really focused on trying to make sure that our 700 families who lost a member of their family are taken care of. And so I spent the day yesterday and part of the day in talking to our insurance company. Our insurance company, CNA, told me that they would, they told our guys, they didn't tell me, and then they told me that they were willing to treat this as an accidental death, which means that they would double the policy for all of my victims upstairs and all of us, and so that added $35 million to that group upstairs. But the sad thing is, so $35 million sounds like so much money, but if you divide it by 700 people, it's only $50,000. It's not enough to. So that's why we need to work on our foundation.
Though understandably devastated, Howard was widely criticized at the time for cutting off the paychecks of all missing 658 workers within days of the attacks, even before they were confirmed to be dead, according to a 2017 article by The Intercept. However, Lutnick also received plenty of positive media coverage when he promised to donate 1/4 of the firm's profits over the next 5 years to the families of the lost employees and vowed to pay their health insurance parents for 10 years, distributing $180 million in total, which averaged to about $275,000 per victim. At one point, he was even asked by the New York Post if he considered himself a hero, to which he started crying and said he'd rather be a friend of the families.
Take care of my 700 families. 700 families. I have 700 families. I can't say it. I can't say it without crying.
In 2001, he filed a $1 billion lawsuit against American Airlines, claiming that the airline was negligent for failing to detect and stop the hijackers who ultimately crashed the plane into the building, according to Time magazine. After 12 long years of litigation, Cantor finally reached a settlement of $135 million, but the money didn't go to the families. Fox Business actually broke this story in 2014, a year after the settlement, writing, "Some executives at Cantor Fitzgerald are steaming mad at their boss, Chief Executive Howard Lutnick, for quietly pocketing a chunk of the $135 million settlement the company received from American Airlines. Some people inside Cantor believed the money would be distributed to families of company employees who died in the attacks or put in the firm's general coffers. But during a conference call in March, Lutnick told senior executives the bulk of the money would be distributed among the firm's partners, according to one person on the call. Further, the person said each partner would receive $2 for each partnership unit. The source also said Lutnick is widely believed to own the biggest piece of the firm's partnership shares, thus entitling him to possibly tens of millions of dollars from the settlement. I have no idea how much he made from this, but he is the biggest partner, the source said. Speculation in the firm suggests Lutnick took anywhere from $15 million to $25 million from the settlement. But The Intercept went even further, interviewing two widows of Cantor Fitzgerald employees who died in the attacks. Both women say they had no idea of any settlement because they had no idea there had even been a lawsuit. It was surprising, one woman said, because Lutnick always made it sound like he was always going to take care of us and was doing everything in our best interest. And now learning about this doesn't feel like that anymore. She adds that other victims' families had not been aware either. Weird, I thought he was a friend of the families though. Lutnick has never denied that he took the money, and in fact, a Cantor spokeswoman told Fox Business that all of the money for the business interruption recovery relating to the American Airlines case went either to strengthen and support the overall business or to the over 600 Cantor partners, precisely proportionate with the exact stake in the company, Mr. Lutnick included. One unnamed executive told Fox that it was actually fine for Lutnick and the other partners to distribute the loot for themselves because, put simply, Cantor never promised family victims a portion of the money in the first place, and that this was just really a business interruption lawsuit at the end of the day. But that's rich because according to Kenneth Feinberg, administrator of the September 11th Victim Compensation Fund, which had been established by Congress to reimburse those affected by the attacks, Howard Lutnick had vociferously criticized him for keeping payments from the fund in a narrow range and not providing more money to the families of high-earning Cantor workers. But then after Cantor was awarded a 9-figure settlement by American Airlines, Lutnick completely ignored the opportunity to do what he had always criticized Feinberg for. Instead, it's kind of like they reimbursed themselves for part of the $180 million they had dished out in the past. Although they had sought more, it was a $1 billion lawsuit after all. Here's what Lutnick had to say after the settlement. For the insurance companies, this was just another case, just another settlement, but not for us. We could never and will never consider it ordinary. For us, there is no way to describe this compromise with inapt words like ordinary, fair, or reasonable. All we can say is that the legal formality of this matter is over. Such heartfelt words coming from a dude who used the tragedy to personally enrich himself when there was nothing stopping him from paying the families. As Feinberg put it, Cantor could do whatever they want with that money. Just add Howard Lutnick to the long list of embarrassments this country has on its resume. The fact that he's advanced to such a prestigious and powerful position in government only speaks to how far we've fallen as a nation. In an age where the UK has arrested a former member of the royal family and a former former ambassador to the US, Howard Lutnick losing his job should be the absolute bare minimum. As of now, it's basically a bipartisan issue to call for the man's resignation. It really is not that difficult a stance to take. If you ask me, he should be investigated too, along with everyone who continued to associate with Epstein, especially after he was released from jail. Howard Lutnick has always been a liar and a crook. But if Donald Trump has shown us anything, it's that that's who he likes to surround himself with. Because if one of his associates pops up in the Epstein files, that gives him something to hold over that person's head. The more compromised a person is, the more leverage Trump has over them, the more he can get them to carry out his bidding. I hope that with enough time we start to see more consequences. The UK has already arrested 2 of their cretins, and I refuse to be upstaged by the British dude. But at the same time, I have pretty much negative confidence in a Justice Department that flies to the Olympics to slam beers with hockey players over doing the actual work of FBI director. Clown country, dude. Okay, this video's gone on too long. I'm gonna go. Bye.